Hi, I'm Doug Humphrey. I enjoy the outdoors, and as a result I have become an amateur landscape photographer. Today I want to talk to you about a technique that I use called back button focusing. I find that very useful in my landscape photography, and I want to introduce some of you to that concept. Probably the most critical element in acquiring an image is focus. Software in post-processing can correct exposure within limits, but it can't focus. If not set on manual mode, modern digital cameras by default use the center point in the viewfinder for autofocus and exposure when the shutter release button is pressed halfway and held. Now that works very well. In fact, I have used that method, and I still use it from time to time. One of the problems with that, however, is that the focus and the exposure is taken from the same point in the photograph. So, is there a way that we can separate those two functions? Well, one way is to use your viewfinder and frame the composition of the scene that you want, and then in the viewfinder use the several focus points that are supplied and select the one that's over the subject that you want. Then when you press the shutter release button and hold it halfway, the exposure measurement is taken and the focus is acquired from the selected point. One of the problems with that is there are several focus points in the viewfinder. My camera has 41, so it takes some time to select those points and to select the proper one. So what is another method for doing that? Well, you can assign a button on the back of the camera. That button can be assigned to the autofocus function, thereby releasing the autofocus from the shutter release button. When you press that button with your thumb, it's on the back of the camera, autofocus takes place, and when you release the button, the autofocus is locked. Now you can move the central focus point to another place in the scene, press the shutter release button halfway and hold it, and exposure measurement is done at that point, and it's locked. So now both exposure is locked and focus is locked. You can then frame the composition that you want in the viewfinder of your camera, fully press the shutter release button, and acquire the image. Now let me give you a specific example of how I use that. Let's suppose that I have a landscape scene, and in that scene is a bright, beautiful bush, and I want to make sure that bush is in sharp focus in the final image. What I will do is to place this central point in the viewfinder over the bush, and with my thumb press the back button focus release it, and now the focus is locked on that bush. But because that bush is too bright, I don't want to use that as the central point of my exposure measurement. So I select a more appropriate point in the scene and place the central point in the viewfinder over that, then press and hold the shutter release button at the halfway point. Now again, I have locked exposure and I have locked focus. Fully depressing the shutter release button then acquires the image. Here is shown the autofocus button on the back of the camera, and how convenient it is that it sits right under my thumb. So when I need to set autofocus, I can simply press that and then release it.
That's this button right there.
Yeah.